So last week we talked about we looked in the book of Second Chronicles, and we were looking at what it actually the temple being built. Solomon had just built the temple. He had put all the furnishings in it. David had passed away. Solomon has now built this temple, and in chapter 6 of Second Chronicles, he he says this amazing prayer from the heart, but also coupled with truth. And at the end of that prayer, the fire comes down from heaven and consumes the sacrifice, and the whole house is filled with glory. So we can see that God was pleased with everything going on. It was a huge pivotal moment. There was an actual physical temple built. And then God appeared to Solomon at night after all that. And this is what he said to him. He said, basically, hey, if I send trouble your way, famine, different things like that. If I send trouble your way, this is what you need to do, basically. And in Second Chronicles 7:14, it says, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves, pray, seek my face, turn from the wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. And we realized that was like a domino effect. It was basically a domino effect, because if we humble ourselves before the Lord, then we're probably praying. If we're praying, then we're seeking God's face. And if we're seeking God's face, then we're going to want to turn from our iniquities. It just all goes hand and foot. And like the verse says in James 4:10, if we humble ourselves in the sight of the Lord, not man, but in the sight of the Lord, then he will exalt us. And we talked about how humble is just to bring low, and exalting is just to bring high. And so that was really, we had a good time afterwards also. But today I want to go to James chapter 3 in the word here. And I've been in James for some reason. The Lord just keeps leading me back there. I'm not reading there. I don't know why, but it just kind of, I was surprised that the Lord had led me back here. And I'm going to read James 3, 1 through 6, and we're going to kind of look at that. And it's really good stuff here. Verse 1, it says, let not many of you be teachers, my brethren, knowing that we shall receive heavier judgment. For in many things we all stumble. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body also. Now, that's a big statement right there. That is a big statement. Basically, what it's saying, hey, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to stumble, we're going to fall. But if we don't let our tongue stumble, then we're going to be a perfect man, according to what this Bible's saying in God's eyes. And we're going to be able to turn our situation around. And the word perfect in the Greek, it just means complete. It means perfect. A lot of people put mature, but I looked at a lot of different translations and they use the word perfect as well. So we can see the high priority God is putting on what we speak. And if you go to James 3:8, it says, no man can tame the tongue. So we can't tame it. And before that, it says everything can be tamed by man, but no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. And so you think, okay, well, that's almost a seemingly contradicting statement there. But we know that Christ dwells in us. And we can't be perfect. We've sinned. We've fallen short of the glory of God. But if we're abiding in Christ and he lives in us, then he can be perfect through us. And we've all experienced moments where maybe the Holy Spirit has stopped our tongue and kept us from saying something that we should have, and able to bridle our tongue, because it is such a destructive thing, as we're going to read, like the tongue, like we just heard, like it's a deadly poison. And it's so weird that about a month ago, in my WhatsApp, I had a video, and I just found it a few days ago. It was a video of Bruce Lee. Now, I'd never seen a Bruce Lee movie. I don't even, I know who he is, and I'm not an advocate of Bruce Lee by any means. But I had saved this video because I thought it was really good. You know, when somebody says something true, somebody says something true. And in this video, he was talking about words. And he was saying, don't speak negatively of yourself. And he says, your body doesn't know the difference. He says, don't even joke about it. Don't speak negatively because our words have power and they have energy, was the word he used. Now, of course, we know it's not energy, it's actually spirit, but spirit is energy. And Jesus said that, right? He said that in John 6:63. He said, my words are spirit and they are life. The words I speak to you, they are spirit and they are life. So our words, according to this, it can turn our whole situation around, and they have the power to do that. And let's kind of keep reading here. Now, if we put the horses' bridles into their mouths that they may obey us, we turn their whole body also. Behold, the ships also, though they are so great and are driven by rough winds, are still turned by a very small rudder, wherever the impulse of the steersman wills. So I read this, and God brought back a complete memory that I had probably 25 years ago. And I don't know if Dan's on tonight, but it was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It was about 27 years.
Yes, I am.
Okay. It was 27 years ago. I was a deckhand at a resort there. And it was about these boats are like 250 people they take. It's like 2 stories, and they're pretty good sized boats. My mama and papa, they were there, and they were there with me. And the captain asked me if I would come up and if I would drive the boat. And usually he didn't ask people like me to drive the boat. They were like first mates. And so I don't know why he did it that day. And uh, and so I go up there, and he goes, "You ever driven a boat?" I said, "Yeah, you know, my dad has a boat and I've driven a boat." And he goes, "Okay, go ahead." And, you know, it's a big, huge steering wheel. It's a big wooden steering wheel. And so I started driving the boat, and he had to do some paperwork. And so he's working on his paperwork. And the boat's like this, and the boat starts going this way. So I start turning the other way, but the boat is still going right. And so I kind of keep turning, and I'm turning a lot. And then I was like, all of a sudden, it kind of caught. Okay, now it's going back this way. And I got it straight again. Okay, I'm doing great. You know, I'm a captain now. You know, I'm feeling good about myself. Then it goes this way. And I start turning the other way as hard as I can, like full speed. And it's going further this time. And then finally it catches, and I'm going this way, back over here. Finally, after a few times of this, one time, I was looking out the side of the window driving this boat. Finally, the captain gets up. He screams at me. He's like, "What are you doing?" You know, and kicks me out of there. And, you know, God bless my grandmother. I went and said, hey, Dot, Dot's her name. I was like, "Hey, Dot, sorry. I got you guys all turned around here." And she goes, "Gabriel, we just thought it was part of the ride," you know? So she was a very sweet woman. But words are like that. It's like sometimes we speak and we don't know when things change. We don't know when a situation changes. And we are seeing here the power of words in display. And if they're full of deadly poison, there are words, then they have to be full of life, just like Jesus had. My words are spirit and their life. And we also know in Proverbs 18:21 that life and death are in the power of the tongue. So we have power to speak blessing, we have power to speak cursing. And what we are speaking is creating our reality. It's creating it. And like the ship, you know, we don't see it sometimes. We don't know, but sometimes we're speaking negatively, but that rudder's actually starting to turn something in us. And it's also when we start speaking positively, things are starting to turn in us because we've been there before. We felt maybe depressed, we maybe felt sad, and maybe we put on a worship song or whatever, or we got in the word or started speaking God's truth in our life. And that started to get down in our heart and started to change things. You know, I've been there. It's like the song Robin Mark sings. He sings, put on the garments of praise for the spirit of heaviness. And then it goes on like that. So basically, just turning our situation around by what we speak. But it's difficult, right? Because human emotions are sometimes in there. So let's go on. Let's look at verse 5. The tongue also is a little member and boasts great things. Behold, how much wood is kindled by how small a fire. And the tongue is a fire, the world of iniquity among our members is the tongue. It defiles the whole body and sets on fire the wheel of nature and is set on fire by hell. Now, I kind of meditated on this and I thought, is there a possible worse way to describe how damaging our tongue can be? And I want to read it in the NIV. I want to read just two verses, those last two, because that was a little bit choppy, at least for me. Verse 5, it says, likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boast. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. How many of us have been there when that word comes out in our relationships? You know, my wife, I just think, oh my God, it comes out. I wish I wouldn't have said that. And the fire has started, right? The fire has started. And if we don't use the principles that God has given us to get that fire down, we're going to have a forest fire on our hands, right? And verse 6 says, I kind of lost my spot here. Verse 6 says, the tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body. It sets the whole course of one's life on fire and is set on fire by hell. Man, the whole course of one's life on fire. Because it says, you know, 1 minute we're speaking blessings of God, and 1 minute we're cursing men that are made in God's image. And it's amazing that it can set on course the fire of one's whole life. But it can also bless somebody's life and turn it around. So it's simple, right? Just change our words, right? Just change our words and things will be easier. But it's not so simple, is it? Right? Because sometimes we have human emotions in us. And although we are growing in Christ, sometimes there's areas in our life that Christ has not come into our life because we, like it said in verse 2, we want that perfect man to be exonerated in us, right? Because we had just read a few weeks ago, we looked at Ephesians 4:24. It said, put on the new man that has been created in righteousness and holiness and truth. And we want that man to grow in us. But where does that man need to grow? And it also says in Ephesians 1, it says that the eyes of our heart would be enlightened. So the heart is the key, and that's where Christ dwells. 1 Peter 3:4 says, the hidden man of the heart. And we know if the eyes of the heart, the hidden man of the heart, that's not us, that's Jesus. And that's Jesus dwelling in us. And that's who needs to come out because he's the one that's going to bring the abundant life to us through our mouth. Now, he can do it outwardly, but as we grow and more in him, he's going to speak it through us, right? We're just vessels, like it says. 2 Corinthians 4:7, we're jars of clay, that the exceeding greatness may be of God and not from ourselves. It's not by our power, it's by his power working in us to do it. So we see there, if we get things in the heart, right? Because what did Jesus say? He said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth will speak. And then he goes on to say, every idle word you speak, you're going to have to give an account of it. And he said, by your words, you're going to be justified. And by your words, you're going to be condemned. And it's a big thing, right? Words are a huge thing. The world was created by words. Hebrews chapter 11, it says that, it's the worlds were framed by the word that God spoke, and Jesus was the word. So how important is it for us to see that, because that is what is going to help develop us. But we have these things that come against us and make us feel a certain way. I remember this story. It was a long time ago that a pastor, there was a guy, get the story straight here. There was a guy that came to another pastor, and he said to him, hey, pastor, I'm feeling depressed. And the guy says, okay, who told you that you were depressed? And the guy says, well, I'm just kind of feeling that way. It's just kind of what I've been feeling. And the guy says, okay, but who told you that you were depressed? He goes, well, I'm just feeling this way. And he said again, but who told you this? Of course, the guy gets upset. And then he's like, nobody told me that. It's just the way I'm feeling. He goes, because it's not God telling you that. That's not what God's saying. And it's important that we connect with that. In a little bit, I'm going to kind of expound on that. I'm going to share an experience I had where God showed me something really great. And I got some pictures I want to show you too of that. But we can see that from Romans chapter 10, verse 10, it says, with the heart, one believes unto righteousness, and with the mouth, confession is made to salvation. Now, that word salvation can mean a lot of different things in the Greek. Sozo, soteria. I know a lot of you, we've studied that before. It can mean a lot of different things, deliverance from all things in our life. And again, there it is. It's getting things in that heart, getting what we need in the heart. And there's a great example of that, what Jesus said. He said, it's not what goes in the mouth that defiles you. He said, it's what comes out of the heart and out of the mouth that defile you. He said, the things that come in, they can't do that. But what comes out of the heart of man, that's what defiles him. For out of the heart of man cometh wickedness, foolishness, pride, railings, all these different things. And he says, that's what defiles you. So what we are speaking is changing our destiny. It's as true as that. And we can all relate to that because we see everything. God formed the worlds by words. Jesus was the word, and the importance of the word. And we have to remember the story of David, when we all know that he defeated Goliath, and he had this amazing win for all of Israel. But before that, David he had brought some bread to the battle lines. Israel was on one side, Philistine was on the other. And he had brought bread to this battle. And he had heard what Goliath was saying. He's like, hey, we can defeat this guy. We can defeat it. And word got back to Saul. Saul brought David there. And he asked him, what's going on? And David says, hey, man, there's no need for the guy's heart to fail because everybody's heart failed in that situation. We can win this battle. And he says, you're just a youth. You can't do it. This Goliath, he's been a man of war since he was a baby or when he was young. But David said, God has delivered me out of the lion and the bear, and this Philistine will be no different. He'll be no different. God is able to deliver us of this Philistine's hand, and we'll kill him. And then Saul says, go. Now think about what was at stake there. If they lost, they were going to have to serve the Philistines. If they won, then they were going to serve them. Why would a king who everybody's afraid put a little kid into this battle? It's because he felt God's presence, I believe, won, but he felt his heart and he heard his words. David had already spoke the victory before anything even happened, before anything ever happened. And God has given us that victory, right? He's given it. 1 Corinthians 15:57 says, thanks be to God who's given us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Victory over what? Victory over anything and any circumstance that you and I would go through. He's given us that victory. Now, we may have to go through trials. We may have to go through suffering. But if we, like it says, if we humble ourselves to God, seek him, he will do it. Now, David had learned a lot of things before that, right? We had talked about if we're faithful in the small, then we'll be faithful in the large. So David had won a few small victories, and I don't even know if I'd call them a small victory over a lion and a bear. They didn't have guns, but he had won some victories. And so with this, he was used to seeing victory, and he came into this, and this victory is no different. But we know that our heart needs fuel so that our thoughts have the right thoughts. And then if our thoughts have the right thoughts, then our mouth is going to speak the right things. And there's a very important thing that God showed me. And I want to share this with you. About in 2020, this happened, I think. And I kind of want to just go back just a little bit. And so I had lost my job. The school closed down where I was working, and it closed down. I worked maintenance. And then all of a sudden, we were about to have a baby. It's 2019. We're about to have a child, me and my wife. And so I thought I was going to get a few jobs, didn't get the jobs. We ended up going into my parents' basement. Thanks be to God. It was a huge blessing. They had a basement for us. We had our son, and then the COVID hit. There was no jobs available. And I just was really struggling with direction from God. I was struggling with my identity of who God had showed me that I am. I was struggling for a lot of things. And I was listening to this testimony of what this woman said. She was struggling with something, a healing. She had this incurable thing that she could not be healed of. She had been to a lot of doctors, just kind of like the woman with the issue of blood in Jesus' time, She went to all these different places. She couldn't be healed, kind of like that situation. And so she had went to a lot of places. She didn't get healed. And then she had come to this guy and asked him, would you pray that I'd be healed of this? I don't know if it was her back. I can't remember what it was. And the guy got a word from the Lord. And he says, you don't need physical healing. You need emotional healing. And he said to her, he said, the way you're viewing yourself and the lies that you believe about yourself and the lies that you view God are causing all this problem in your life. And she could not believe it, and she started to agree with it. She saw God that he was a very hard person. She was very strict on herself, didn't have a lot of grace or mercy for herself. And she was just a lot of different things. And she ended up getting healed of that. And she went around and was speaking all kinds of places. Now, when this happened, I was crying a lot. I mean, I was crying because I could relate to a lot of it. And I just could not stop crying, It was just and it was good, because it's like I knew God was doing surgery on me, basically, And I'm sitting there and I'm crying, and I'm on my parents live on a lake, and I'm on their pontoon boat, and the lake is in front of me, and I'm sitting there and I'm crying, and all of a sudden God speaks to me, and he says the word promises. And I thought to myself, promises. And I kind of cleared my eyes and I started thinking, why would God speak to me right now? And I looked up and I saw in front of me a rainbow. Now, the weird thing about this is it hadn't rained in 3 weeks, and it certainly hadn't rained that day. It was completely dry, and I didn't even know there was any clouds out or anything. And you'll see here in a second, there were no clouds to the right, to the left, nothing. And I see this rainbow. And immediately I thought, okay, man, God's speaking to me here, promises. Of course, you know what reminds us of the rainbow, right? Noah, where God said, "I won't flood the earth." He put a rainbow in the sky in the book of Genesis, and I started to think about the promises. So God's putting something together for me, and then He spoke something else, but it was almost in my spirit, and it said, "Look at where the rainbow's going," in like a jovial way. And I looked, and it was going behind this hill. Then it was just disappearing out of nowhere. I didn't know what God was saying. Then He said again, "Look at where the rainbow's going." And I looked down at the water and I saw the reflection of that rainbow going directly into my feet, to my legs. And what does that mean? That means standing on God's promises, standing on His promises. That's what is going, if we get His promises into our heart, then life will come out of our heart because His promises are Himself, right? The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And Jesus said to His disciples in John 15:3, "You are clean because the word I have spoken to you." Now I'm going to show you this, this picture of this. I've got to screen share it here. And I want to get this, share it, so you guys can see this picture of the rainbow. Okay, it's loading. It's loading. Sorry, my computer's a little bit slow. And I think everyone can see it. Can everyone see it? Raise your hand if it's.
No, we can't see anything.
Okay. My computer's spinning. Okay, it should be up now. Okay, so we can see here, kind of let you take it in for a second there. And we can see the reflection going in here. I mean, what are the coincidences? What are the odds that that would happen? You know, that God would kind of put that together. And over here, you can see to the left, there's no clouds. And over to the right, there's no clouds. And you can even see here, there's not a lot of clouds. Like I said, it didn't rain that day. So it was, and it's so interesting that a few days ago, my wife showed me a video of a woman who had wrote inside of her house all kinds of promises of God. I didn't tell her what I was going to talk about. I didn't say anything about that. She just showed me this video that she saw on Facebook or something. And it was a video of a woman who was writing promises all over her house. And then after her house got built, she took a picture, and over the house was a perfect rainbow circling her house. So it was like confirmation to God to me saying, "Hey, man, this is what I want you to tell. It's what I want you to speak." Because that's how important it is, you know. And this happened to me, but this is all of us. This is a universal Christian principle. This is all for us to understand because this applies to all of our lives. All of us. The rainbow is going to us and it's telling us that is what's going to keep the lies out. That's what's going to keep the enemy out of our mind, because we have the mind of Christ. And that mind of Christ is developing more and more and more in us. And the more that we feed it, God's promises and his truth. And that's what's going to cause us to speak that life into our situation. So I know we're running out of time, and I want to open it up. If anybody has anything to say, I know that we're going to pray, and then afterwards we can talk longer. But I want to open it up. I'm going to stop this recording first.